What would you do if you found a wounded child hiding in your barn, hunted by soldiers who wanted her dead? One lonely farmer's decision to protect a Native American girl would test everything he believed about right and wrong, leading to a bond that defied the brutal realities of 1876 America. This is a story of courage, compassion, and an unlikely family forged in the fires of the Old West. If you're ready for a tale that will touch your heart and make you believe in the power of human kindness, hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible stories, and ring that notification bell because you won't want to miss what happens next. The Nebraska wind carried more than dust that October morning in 1876. Thomas McCarthy approached his barn, wooden doors creaking across his homestead. At 45, the Irish immigrant found solace in farm work that helped numb the ache of losing his wife, Margaret, 2 years prior. As he stepped inside to check his horses, something felt different. The animals were restless. Then he heard a soft whimper. "Who's there?" Thomas called out, hand moving to his rifle. From behind hay bales, a small figure emerged. A girl, no more than 12, with black braids and torn Lakota clothing stained with blood. Her dark eyes met his. She clutched her shoulder, where a bandage barely concealed a bullet wound. "Please," she whispered in broken English. "They kill my family. I hide here. I sorry." Thomas lowered his rifle, approaching slowly. "What happened to you, little one?" "Soldiers, blue coats. They come to our camp, say we steal cattle. We no steal. But they—" Her voice broke, tears streaming down her cheeks. Thomas had heard the stories about military raids. Looking at this broken child, he knew the horrible truth. "What's your name, lass?" "Ayanna. It mean forever flowering." As Thomas cleaned her wound, Ayanna spoke about the attack. Captain Harrison's soldiers had arrived at dawn, claiming stolen cattle. When her father tried to explain they had none, the soldiers opened fire. Her mother had pushed her toward the horses, screaming for her to run. "I ride all night. Horse fall. I walk. I see your light." As if summoned by their conversation, hooves thundered toward the farmhouse. Thomas's blood ran cold seeing 6 soldiers in blue uniforms, led by a man with captain's stripes and cold eyes. "Stay hidden," Thomas whispered urgently. "No matter what happens, don't come out." Thomas stepped outside as Captain Harrison dismounted. The officer was tall, with a thin mustache and intimidating bearing. "Afternoon, Captain. What brings the army to my farm?" Harrison's eyes scanned the property. "We're tracking a hostile Indian who escaped yesterday. A young girl, about 12. Very dangerous, trained to spy and report our movements to other hostiles." Thomas kept his expression neutral, though his stomach churned at the obvious lie. "I haven't seen any Indians around here. You wouldn't mind if we searched then?" Harrison asked, signaling his men. "Of course not," Thomas replied, praying Ayanna would stay hidden. After searching every building, Harrison finally mounted his horse. "If you see anything suspicious, McCarthy, you report it immediately. Harboring hostiles is punishable by death." As the soldiers rode away, Thomas waited an hour before returning to the barn. He found Ayanna curled up, silently crying. "They're gone, but they'll be back." Ayanna looked up with eyes too old for her face. "You no give me to them. Why?" Thomas sat beside her, thinking of Margaret and the children they'd never had. Because what they did was wrong, and because everyone deserves someone to protect them. As the sun set, Thomas made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He would protect this child, no matter the cost. 3 weeks passed since Ayanna arrived, and Thomas adapted to having someone else in his home. The girl was clever, quickly learning his routines and helping despite her healing shoulder. October. Air carried winter's promise as Thomas worked on his chicken coop. Ayanna sat nearby, mending his shirt with precise stitches her grandmother had taught her. "Your wife," Ayanna said suddenly. "She teach you to be gentle?" Thomas paused in his hammering. "Aye, she did. Margaret had a way about her." "How did you?" "No, I was married." Ayanna pointed to the garden beside the house. "Woman's garden. The way you plant flowers, not just food." Thomas smiled sadly. "She died 2 years ago. Wagon accident." "My mother, too," Ayanna replied quietly. "But from soldiers, not storm." They worked in comfortable silence until Ayanna spoke again. "In my tribe, we say grief is like river. It carve new path through heart, but still it flow to same place love." Thomas set down his hammer, struck by her wisdom. "Your people have beautiful ways of thinking. You want to know about my people?" Ayanna asked with surprise. "Most white people think we are savage. I'd like to know about your family, if you're willing to share." Ayanna's eyes brightened for the first time since he'd known her. "My father was medicine man. He teach me about plants, about healing. And my grandmother tells stories that make the spirit dance." Before Thomas could respond, they heard riders approaching. He motioned for Ayanna to hide in the root cellar they'd prepared. "Stay calm," he whispered as she disappeared beneath the hidden trapdoor. "I'll handle this." Thomas walked outside to meet 3 mounted soldiers. Harrison sat his horse with the same arrogant bearing, but his eyes were harder, more suspicious. "Captain, back so soon? We've had reports of Indian activity. Stolen food from the Miller farm. Fresh tracks leading this direction." Thomas kept his expression neutral. "Haven't seen anything unusual." Harrison's men searched more thoroughly this time, but found nothing. After they left, Thomas waited an hour before opening the cellar. "They getting closer," Ayanna whispered. "Maybe I should go." "Absolutely not," Thomas said firmly. "You're not going anywhere." That evening, Ayanna taught Thomas basic Lakota words. He struggled with pronunciation, making her laugh for the first time since arriving. "Waste," she said, pointing to their stew. "Good." "Waste," Thomas attempted, butchering the pronunciation. "Your tongue too stiff. Like you tried a lasso word instead of letting it flow." Thomas tried again with better success, and Ayanna clapped her hands. "Now, you sound almost human instead of dying buffalo." Thomas burst into laughter, and Ayanna giggled a sound so pure it made his heart ache for all she had lost. "Tig Sila," she said, pointing to him. "Grandfather, not your age, but your heart. Kind to child, not your blood." Thomas felt warmth spread through his chest. "And what do I call you?" "Zung-Si, daughter of heart, not body." As the fire crackled, Thomas realized that for the first time in 2 years, his house felt like a home again. Neither noticed the shadow passing by the window. Someone who had been watching their Lakota lesson with great interest. November brought early snow to Nebraska, blanketing Thomas's farm in white that would have been beautiful if it weren't dangerous. Snow meant tracks would be visible for days, making it nearly impossible to hide Ayanna's presence. Thomas was chopping firewood when he noticed riders approaching. His heart sank as he recognized not just Captain Harrison, but Colonel James Mitchell, the regional commanding officer. This was no routine patrol. "Ayanna," he called softly. "Visitors. You know what to do." She appeared briefly, her eyes meeting his with understanding, then vanished to the hiding place behind the false pantry wall. Thomas continued chopping as 8 mounted soldiers surrounded his property. Colonel Mitchell was a stern man in his 50s, with gray hair and a career officer's bearing. "Mr. McCarthy," the colonel said, dismounting. "I'm Colonel Mitchell. You know Captain Harrison." "Colonel, what brings the army out in this weather?" "We have a situation requiring resolution," Mitchell replied. "Captain Harrison has been tracking a fugitive Indian child for over a month. Intelligence suggests she may be hiding here. Thomas felt his mouth go dry. Intelligence? Harrison stepped forward, voice cold with anger. We have a witness who heard Lakota being spoken from your house 3 nights ago. Care to explain? Thomas's mind raced. Someone had been watching, listening. That's quite a claim, Captain. Then, you won't mind a thorough search, Mitchell stated. This time, we'll check for hidden spaces, false walls. Thomas nodded, watching helplessly as experienced soldiers moved systematically through his property. These men were different. They tapped walls, checked floorboards, examined every possible hiding place. Sir, Corporal Davies called from the pantry. This wall sounds different. Thomas felt his world collapse as they discovered the false wall. Within minutes, they'd found the hidden space. Empty, Davies reported. But it's been used recently. Fresh straw on the floor. Colonel Mitchell studied Thomas with new intensity. Mr. McCarthy, I'm going to ask you directly. Are you harboring the Indian child we're seeking? The moment Thomas had dreaded had arrived. He looked at these men and thought of Ayanna's trust, her gentle spirit, her desperate need for protection. Colonel, Thomas said quietly, may I ask what will happen to the child if you find her? She be returned to a reservation where she belongs, Harrison interjected, but Mitchell held up a hand, silencing his subordinate. Mr. McCarthy, I've been fighting Indians for 20 years. What I can tell you is that Captain Harrison has been zealous in his interpretation of orders regarding this situation. Harrison's face reddened. Sir, the girl is a security threat who must be eliminated. Captain, Mitchell's voice carried absolute authority. If there is a child here, I give you my word she will be treated according to military regulations and delivered safely to Pine Ridge Agency. Thomas looked into Mitchell's eyes and saw something he trusted, a weariness with unnecessary violence. But he also saw Harrison's cold hatred. Colonel Mitchell, Thomas said slowly, I appreciate your assurance. But what happens to me if I've broken federal law? That would depend on circumstances, Mitchell replied honestly. Courts view acts of humanitarian aid differently than active rebellion. Thomas took a deep breath. Colonel, I need you to understand something. I'm a simple farmer who's never hurt anyone. If I were to hypothetically help someone, it would be because they needed help, not because I opposed the government. Mitchell nodded slowly. I understand, Mr. McCarthy. And if there were someone here who needed protection, I would hope that protection could be provided by honorable men who value justice over revenge. The two men stared at each other, an entire conversation in that silence. Finally, Mitchell spoke. Captain Harrison returned to the garrison with 5 men. I'll handle this personally. Harrison's face went white with fury. Sir, my orders were to— Your orders are whatever I tell you they are, Captain. Return to base immediately. Consider yourself relieved of this assignment. As Harrison and his men rode away in anger, Mitchell turned back to Thomas. Now then, Mr. McCarthy, if there happens to be anyone else on this property who needs to hear what I have to say, perhaps they should join our conversation. Thomas hesitated for only a moment. Ayanna, it's safe now. After several minutes, the girl emerged, walking slowly toward them with her head held high despite her fear. Mitchell's expression soft, seeing her a child, obviously well cared for, and clearly trusting the man who had protected her. Young lady, the colonel said gently, my name is Colonel Mitchell. What happened to your family was wrong, and I intend to see that you're treated fairly from now on. Ayanna looked up at Thomas, who nodded encouragingly. You promise? She asked. I promise, Mitchell replied solemnly. And Mr. McCarthy here is a good man who did the right thing. As the 3 stood in the falling snow, Thomas realized that sometimes doing the right thing meant trusting in the honor of strangers. And sometimes that trust was not misplaced. Snow had stopped falling, by the time Colonel Mitchell finished explaining the situation. Pine Ridge Agency was 3 days' ride. Northwest and winter weather made travel dangerous. More importantly, Mitchell had concerns about Ayanna's safety if certain soldiers learned her whereabouts. "I propose we wait until spring," Mitchell said, accepting coffee Thomas offered. "The weather will be better, and I can arrange proper escort. In the meantime, this arrangement seems to be working well." Thomas felt relief wash over him. "You're sure this won't cause problems?" "I'll file a report stating our investigation found no evidence of the fugitive in this area," Mitchell replied with a slight smile. As winter deepened, life on the farm settled into rhythm. Thomas taught Ayanna to read and write English, while she shared her people's knowledge of medicine and survival. Colonel Mitchell visited twice, always alone, bringing news. There were no survivors from Ayanna's immediate family, but he'd located her aunt at Pine Ridge, who was eager to care for her. One February morning, as dawn broke clear and cold, Thomas woke to find Ayanna standing by the window, watching the sunrise with unusual intensity. "Everything all right, lass?" "Today is special day," she replied softly. "In my tribe, we have ceremony when winter begins to break. Time to honor those who passed and ask for blessing on new growth." Thomas noticed tears in her eyes. "Would you like to observe this ceremony?" Ayanna nodded. "But I need to dance. Is tradition, and I need to say goodbye to my family proper way." "Then we'll do whatever you need to do," Thomas said without hesitation. Ayanna spent the morning preparing, braiding her hair with special care, using small beads she'd kept hidden since the night she fled. She gathered specific plants from their dried store sage and sweetgrass she'd identified and preserved months earlier. As the sun reached its highest point, she asked Thomas to build a small fire outside. She began to move around the fire in ways that were clearly ancient, her feet finding rhythms older than the farmland around them. "This is not spirit magic," she explained, seeing his reverent attention. "This is how my people remember, how we honor, how we heal." Thomas watched respectfully as Ayanna danced and sang in her native language. Her movements were graceful and purposeful, each step telling part of the story. Sometimes she would pause to add herbs to the fire, creating fragrant smoke the wind carried across the plains. As she danced, she spoke sometimes in Lakota, sometimes in English, addressing family members she would never see again. "Mother, I am safe. I found good man to protect me like you told me. Father, I remember your teachings. Grandmother, I carry your stories in my heart." The ceremony continued as the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered landscape in gold and pink. Thomas found himself deeply moved by the beauty and solemnity of what he witnessed. This wasn't savage ritual. This was profound spirituality, as meaningful as any prayer he'd heard in church. As Ayanna's dance slowed and stopped, she stood quietly by the fire. When she turned to face Thomas, her eyes were clear and peaceful in a way he'd never seen. "I say goodbye now," she said simply. "They know I am safe. They know I will live good life." "And you will," Thomas assured her. "Whether that's at Pine Ridge with your aunt, or—" He paused, then spoke words that had been growing in his heart. "Or if you decide you'd like to stay here, this could be your home for as long as you want." Ayanna's eyes widened. "You would want that? Old Irish farmer. And Lakota girl?" Thomas smiled, thinking of Margaret and how proud she would be. "I think an old Irish farmer could learn a lot from a wise young woman who knows how to make spirits dance at dawn." As winter gave way to spring, their arrangement evolved into something neither had expected but both treasured. Ayanna would go to Pine Ridge to reconnect with surviving family and learn about her heritage. But she would also return to the farm each summer, bridging two worlds and carrying the love of two families. The last morning before Colonel Mitchell arrived to escort her to Pine Ridge, Ayana performed her dawn dance one more time. But this dance was different. Not a goodbye, but a blessing. A ceremony to honor the bond between a grieving farmer and a lost child who had healed each other. As the sun rose over Nebraska plains, Thomas watched Ayana dance and knew that sometimes the most profound miracles were the simplest ones, finding family in unexpected places, discovering that love could bridge any divide, and learning that healing came through helping others heal. The dance ended as the sun reached full brightness, and Ayana smiled at Thomas with pure joy. "Now we are truly family," she said. "Nothing can change that." As Colonel Mitchell appeared on the horizon with his escort, Thomas knew she was right. Some bonds were stronger than blood, deeper than culture, and more enduring than changing seasons. They had given each other something precious, a second chance at belonging, and the knowledge that home wasn't a place, but the people who choose to love you.